Rucking is really big news in modern fitness. It's really popular. There's a bunch of big name guys espousing it like Peter Attia. We've even seen Stuart McGill recently come out with some positives about rucking. The truth about rucking is not what you see in fitness media though. Really, it's being driven by this kind of middle-aged, overweight man seeking to look tactical while walking the dog with a backpack on kind of vibe and wearing a pair of 511 pants. The truth is very different though than what fitness media is portraying. Now there's a company in the US called GoRuck. GoRuck make rucking bags. They hold a bunch of events to sell their products. They've sponsored the CrossFit Games, and they're the guys who had Stuart McGill recently on their podcast talking about the benefits of rucking. What I'm trying to get at is GoRuck are very smart about the kind of marketing they do for their product and selling it to people as the end-all be-all modern fitness product for people in a rush. They say that rucking crushes calories, spares your joints, and is a much more effective workout than going for a run. They even cite injury statistics saying it's much safer for you. When it comes to the energy expense, they say you burn 2 to 3 times more calories per hour than just walking alone while being in a very joint-friendly environment. And then we've got influencers like Peter Attia saying that he regularly goes for long, heavy walks with 55 to 60 pound up the steepest and down the steepest terrain he can find, so that he's really getting a strengthening effect for his legs and really building his VO2 max. And I have to wonder, is that really what rucking does? So let's discuss some of the injuries commonly associated with rucking, what the research on it really says from military researchers, whether it's joint friendly, how much energy you use, and really what are good alternatives to rucking or how to do it safely if you actually want to go down that path. In this study by Orr in 2021 on injuries associated with load carriage, you're going to see something very different than what you see espoused by groups like GoRuck or Peter Attia when it comes to what the genuine cost of rucking really is. What they really found was increased fatigue, changes to spinal mechanics, gait patterns, and neurological fatigue from excess rucking. Whether that's excess time or excess load, there are actually a lot of negatives associated with this activity. Now, the most common injury associated with rucking is the spine. No surprise, when you load the spine, you're going to have some problems with it. When you set a weight behind you, there has to be a degree of forward lean. That puts stress on all the structures of your spine, from the vertebrae themselves to the discs and all the ligaments, tendons, and muscles that support the spine and help to keep your back healthy. The next biggest injury for men is ankles, and for women it's feet. But these injuries are actually not the only ones. The injury statistics for women are particularly frightening, showing that it can even lead to pelvic fractures, that's stress fractures, due to changes in gait from trying to keep up with male soldiers while marching in formation. In fact, these statistics for women are particularly bad because up to 20% of women will suffer a stress fracture from load carriage versus only 6% for men. If you think about a 6% rate of injury though, if you go and look at just about any other recreational physical activity, you'll find that that is an extremely high rate of injury. Weight training, as an example, is something like 0.1% risk of injury for hours trained. And we're saying that rucking, you're actually 60 times more likely to get hurt than you are just going to the gym. But the injuries don't stop there. There's a thing called brachial plexus. Now I can tell you now, having just had spine surgery because of a tumor in my spine, I have this neural plexus too. And what that means is that the nerves have been compressed, meaning conduction, feeling, and muscular activation is all lessened. Brachial plexus can last up to 24 months, and it's caused by the straps of the pack actually compressing the nerves and stopping nerve conduction into the arm. So they noticed a decrease in motor activations, that means loss of strength, decrease in motor control, general numbness, but even loss of motor control for things like grenade throwing as well, all caused by a heavy pack resting on someone's shoulders for an extended period of time. Interestingly, you can get this same format in the feet as well. It's not caused by the pack, it's actually caused from poor or too tight boots, causing the nerves in the feet to be compressed and ending up with that same numb foot system that we had talking about going on in the upper body. Now, one of the biggest things that people should be concerned about is that the increase in fatigue shown from the regular rucking means that your strength is going to be diminished when you go to the gym afterwards. You're going to have decreased motor control, and this increased fatigue and decreased motor control is actually shown to be a mechanism for increased risk of injury in all other activities in the 72 hours following your ruck. GoRuck quotes a study all the time from the University of Pittsburgh showing that rucking was 3 times less likely to hurt you than running. But that's not really what the statistics show, because what the statistics really talk about is 4 different categories. So they had conditioning hikes. This is what GoRuck is counting as the only load carriage involved in this study. They had running, normal PT, and then they had this thing called SUL and Crucible. Now, SUL stands for Single Unit Leadership Exercise, which sounds like it'd be this really cool tactical thing that the groups do when they go away, but what it really is paintball. And obviously when people running around in the bush, shooting at each other with paintballs, there's gonna be some injuries attached to that. But the second half of that, the Crucible, is a pretty typical military conditioning event that usually is some kind of timed and stated weight ruck march or pack march. There would usually be some kind of obstacle course attached and maybe a shooting element as well, and you had to complete the entire thing at a certain standard within a given time frame. That sounds a lot like rucking to me as well. And when you look at these statistics, rucking actually comes out far, far higher than running. In fact, it's 2 times more likely to damage you than running alone. When you consider that running has one of the highest injury statistics year-round of any recreational activity, as high as 70% of runners will get hurt in every 12-month period, and we're saying rucking is 2 times more likely to hurt you than that, maybe that's not a great choice for a recreational activity when you're looking to boost your fitness and it's almost guaranteeing you're going to destroy your fitness by following it. What this format showed is that a longer build-up is more beneficial than a short build-up. Don't just jump straight into rucking. Dip your toe in the water slowly first. The reduction in injuries that was significantly better was from this 8-week format versus the standard 4-week format. Using the 8-week format, they started with as light as 10 kilo and 30 minutes and gradually built their way up to 22 kilo for 3.5 hours over an 8-week period. Whereas the 4-week format, they started at 10 kilo and within 3 extra walks were up to more than double the weight and 3.5 hours to match the standard required. Significantly, you'll note that once a week is the preferred format, and actually when you go through most of the research, including a paper that NATO wrote about the best way to get through load carriage for, this is all military branches with little ill effect, shows that a 10 to 14 day cycle is actually more beneficial. And think about how many people in the general fitness community are recommending 2 to 3 rucks a week and then wondering why things go haywire. This study here by Napick, for instance, in 1992, shows that more than 20% of participants were hurt the very first time they went for a ruck, and 24% of those had a back injury caused by it. Those aren't great statistics for a first-time fitness event. There should be no injuries being caused by your first exposure to a new training methodology. This study here in 2018 by Lovalekar shows that over 30% of the injuries were lower body, but 38% were back injuries. What makes these statistics scary to me as a trainer is that throughout these studies that I've read, it shows that PT in the military is 8 times more likely to hurt you than going to combat. Now, I just want you to keep in mind as a fitness consumer that next time someone says to you, I was a PT in the army, steer clear of them because they're 8 times more likely to hurt you than dropping into Afghanistan in a combat zone. Within the fitness industry, you often see people tout this legs, cardio, core as being the most important parts of load carriage. And actually the studies don't bear that out either. Lower body strength has very little to do with injury reduction in rucking. Far more significant is upper body strength and aerobic development. That's backed up by 2 studies, one in 1987, one in 2001, by one of the granddaddies of strength and conditioning research, Kramer, that showed the exact same thing in males and females is about a 16 to 18% reduction in injuries from following an aerobic and full body strength training program versus just doing an aerobic only or a lower body strength only training program. During these studies, they also recommended that same 1 ruck every 10 to 14 days cycle rather than multiple times a week, and what they found was that performance in rucking doesn't actually improve from more than 1 per week. If anything, it was decreased, and because you've got this fatigue that follows you for up to 72 hours post-training, you're actually impacting all of the strength training sessions that might be following it and decreasing performance overall. Looking at the injury rates even further, Lovalekar again in 21 found that you were 1.8 times more likely to get hurt for every mile road marching than you were running. And during US Army basic training, you were 4.8 times more likely to be hurt road marching than any other form of PT. They further found that people with low aerobic capacity, as in the bottom end of the class based on run times, were between 1.5 and 2.5 times more likely to get hurt from rucking. They also found that people with low BMI were always at a high risk of injury, regardless of strength to weight ratio or aerobic fitness. So if there's one thing you can talk about with rucking, it's that don't be small. The next thing people talk about with rucking is how it's beneficial for bone mineral density. Because we're loading the spine, the feeling is that we're actually going to increase bone density from that loading. Now, there is a study in 2000 by Snow that shows that a rucking program in a weight vest combined with a jumping program over 5 years showed a no decrease in bone mineral density for postmenopausal women. However, you can also find a study that shows that a 16-week jumping protocol in postmenopausal women improves bone density. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather do 10 to 20 sets of 30 seconds of jumping, which is what the second study shows, and maintaining my bone density over however many years, versus having to go for an hour-long ruck in a weight vest multiple times per week just to do the same thing. We've used jumping to help bone healing for a long period of time. It's a well-known physiotherapy method to help people recover from injuries. We haven't added loaded walking, and when you look and you see they're doing loaded walking plus jumping, and we can see that jumping alone is beneficial, well, what do we need the weight vest walking for? It actually shows no extra improvement for all that extra time and effort versus just the jumping alone over a significantly shorter period of time. Now, I put into a walking calculator what happens if I go for a 1 hour walk at 5 kilometers per hour just at body weight, which I put in as 85 kilo for today. At 85 kilo, I burn 347 calories per hour walking 5 kilometers an hour. At 95 kilo, or an extra 10 kilo of weight added, I burn about 388 calories, which is about another 40 calories per hour. At 105 kilo, or another 20 kilo, I burn 429 calories per hour, which is now starting to be nearly 100 calories extra for that kind of effort. To put it in perspective, that's about 1.5 medium apples worth of extra energy that I burnt by wearing 20 kilo to go for the same walk. Now let's talk about some more negatives. One of the things that happens with load added to you is your breathing mechanics change. In fact, there's a 20% change in the way you breathe while you're wearing weight. When the muscles are already tensed to hold you stable with that load on you, they can't actually help you breathe anymore. That leads further to this mistaken belief that because my respiration rate has changed, remember it's had to go up by 20% now to deliver the same amount of oxygen because I can't breathe fully anymore, that now my heart rate is elevated. Because my heart rate is elevated, it must be the same as going for a run at the same heart rate. As we've seen in all the cardio videos I've put out recently, that simply isn't true. In fact, because your breathing mechanics have changed, your respiration rate has changed, you're almost hyperventilating, it means the amount of oxygen you're actually taking in is significantly reduced. You can end up with some cognitive deficits from this, and this has been studied and proven to be true as well. The combination of cognitive decline as well as localized fatigue to trunk and other core musculature leads to a higher risk of injury, and that's only during your ruck. That's not counting for the 72 hours afterwards where these are still in a depleted state. And this starts at a much lower rate than you would think. At only 11 kilo, there's an 8% impairment to how you breathe. At 35 kilo, it's 15%. If you think about it, that means you're somewhere around 10 to 15% less likely to be able to breathe well while you're carrying load. If you want to do this, I don't know, up a steep hill or something like that, you are automatically putting yourself at a massive deficit in terms of being able to stabilize, prevent yourself from injury, and even just think clearly if you had a high motor task that you had to do at the end of that period. Now, just to talk about this further, a 15% body weight load, so if I'm 100 kilo and I put 15 kilo on myself, has shown to lead to postural problems in kids. Even when the load is as low as 10%, which for me means an 8.5 kilo load, it leads to increased trunk flexion, which changes with my head position and changes trunk mechanics. And again, all the important stuff about stabilizing my spine has to change simply because of such a light load. Concerningly, anyone who gets an injury through load carriage is 32% more likely to get another injury within the next 12 months. Of those, 52% of them are going to get another load carriage injury. So what to do if you're desperate to ruck and use it as a form of fitness? The best advice is honestly to do it far less than you are now. Every 10 to 14 days has proven to be ideal through more studies than I've actually been able to count. I went through a 350-page NATO report on this subject to write this video, and there were more studies than I cared to add up. When we're adding load, we know that doing so gradually is far better than doing it quickly. Don't be in a hurry to add load to your pack, and remember that loads as low as 10% will make a significant difference in your spine mechanics. In fact, NATO recommends that the best loads are between 10 and 15 kilo with a maximum load of 32 kilo for between 6 and 8 hours. Stay off hard roads. You're better off walking on soft, flat surfaces like gravel trails for injury resistance and reduction. And finally, like with most things in fitness, there's a list of physical characteristics that you either want to have or avoid. NATO is very clear. The big five are first and foremost that being fatter is far worse for performance and makes you more likely to be injured. The second characteristic is that more muscle mass is better than less. The third is that being taller is better than being shorter, simply because of the way the pack will sit on the body and the amount of sway it will create and how that changes spine and gait mechanics, which opens you up to further injury. Fourth, just like muscle mass, is that more strength is better. And remember again, the highest correlation of resistance to injury in rucking is high degrees of upper body strength and high levels of aerobic fitness. And finally, like with nearly everything to do with fitness, higher VO2 max, higher aerobic fitness is better than less. So as you can see, like with most things with modern fitness, there's a lot of mistruths and misinformation out there. When you really dig into the research, rucking's not a great idea as a general fitness activity. My hobby is walking around with a pack on, either hiking or mountaineering, and I do exactly zero training with a pack year round to get me ready for those events. I only do it for a few weeks, specifically before I'm going away on a big trip, so I can avoid injury and keep my body as robust as possible. This is a really high risk activity. This is one of those things that people look at with the military and think it must be great because the military are doing it. Remember, a PTI is 8 times more likely to hurt you than going to combat is. And then you should probably be able to figure out whether rucking is really the activity you want to do long term or not.